Good evening and welcome to Rupees and Cents, brought to you with the compliments of People's Leasing and Finance PLC. Bandaranaike International Airport is also known as Colombo International Airport and Kattunayake International Airport in Sri Lanka. It is administered by the Airport and Aviation Services and serves as the hub of Sri Lankan Airlines. Plans are now underway for resurfacing its runway and improving the existing facilities. Commencing 6 January 2017, the airport will be closed for 3 months for 8 hours during the daytime. Tonight's Rupees and Cents will be focused on the Bandaranaike International Airport and its future. My very special guests this evening are on my immediate right, Mr. Johan Jayaratna, Executive Director, Airport and Aviation Services Sri Lanka, and Mr. Senarath Hettiarachchi, the Head of Airport Management. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you on Rupees and Cents.
It's a pleasure to be here.
The airport has a long history. Now, after all these years, was there any particular reason or reasons for resurfacing the runway and to start doing all these new additions?
Before we delve into the runway itself, let me give our viewers a brief background on who we are as Airport Aviation. We were formed in 1983 as a state-owned enterprise coming under the Companies Act in 1983, and we are responsible for the management, operations and maintenance of airports in Sri Lanka, namely the Bandaranaike International Airport, the Mattala Airport, and also the Ratmalana Airport. We are also the service provider for all air navigation services in Sri Lanka and the communications, navigation and surveillance as well. We also provide fire and rescue services and all aviation security related services for airports in Sri Lanka.
So Ratmalana Airport and Mattala Airport are also coming within your jurisdiction?
Within our purview, yes.
All right.
And as an ancillary service, we also have a training facility located in Ratmalana, which services all our training needs and also of the region, and some of the SAARC countries utilize our training services as well. So I would like to point out that we are not just all about BIA, but our scope extends much further. And I will ask Senarath, the airport manager, to expand on the runway project at this point.
Yes, as you said, we are heading for this project, and we constructed this BIA runway, the current runway, in 1986.
86?
Yes, and the design life time of the runway was for 20 years or 200,000 landings. So in terms of age, the runway has expired in 2006. So in terms of number of landings, it expired in 1996.
So this is long overdue?
Yes, certainly. In fact, the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the UN body who sets standards for, in terms of safety and other standards for international aerodromes, they recommended in year 2001 for us to repair this runway. It is long overdue, and the issue what we had was it was the single runway that we had. So in any aerodrome in the world having a single runway had no option to repair the runway other than closing it for a particular period daily for a limited period and to rehabilitate it. So we also had to take that decision to close it for, as you said, for the daytime for a period of 3 months and to do the rehabilitation.
Now in this regard, there are some people who have been talking about this closure. Would the planes be diverted to another country or to Mattala? Is it going to affect the operation of the flights? How is it going to affect?
At this point, I need to also make a very emphatic statement that when we decided to go through this process, it was not a single decision made by Airport Aviation, but it was a collective decision made by a lot of agencies, namely the Civil Aviation Authority and the Director General of Civil Aviation, along with Sri Lankan ground handling, who handles all the ground activity at the airport, and the Airline Operators Committee, the BAR, which is the Board of Airline Representatives, and such agencies. So it was a collective decision. And if I were to go further, if you look at the period of closure, January to April, this was not once again an arbitrary decision. It was based on weather conditions, and the history of the weather patterns in Sri Lanka are such that that is considered to be the driest time of the year. And if you were to look at the timing, 8:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon, this was also decided upon the movement patterns of aircraft, and the least amount of movements were happening during that period of time, and that was why we chose that. Contrary to what has been stated in the media, that even though the preferred time was a nighttime closure, and that we had overlooked that request for a nighttime closure, that is not particularly so. We had to take a very democratic decision because we have, I believe, 25 airlines that fly into BIA currently, 24 or 25, I believe, something to that effect.
28.
28, thank you. So we had to make a democratic decision on that, and based on that we decided that this was the optimum time to have this closure. So having said that, as far as the diversions are concerned, it would not be so, because all these airlines have rescheduled their flights to fall within the opening hours. And Sri Lankan, of course, did have to cancel some flights, and so did Emirates, and a couple of other airlines did have to cancel some flights. But the rest of them have rescheduled, and if you look at the operational aspects of it, 90%, and I repeat, 90% of the operations are existent, and there's probably a 10 to 12%. Let Sunrat.
Yes, actually, now that the flight schedule for the particular period has been finalized, so when you analyze it, it is certain that the almost all airlines have rescheduled their aircraft to operate during the night as opposed to the daytime, so that the BIA will continue with its 90% of its operations during this closure time. So even though there's a big public outcry in media and printed and other media, of course, we need to highlight the fact that the 90% of the aircraft movements have been rescheduled to be operated during the night, and therefore there is no such big impact to any related industry, whether it is tourism or hotel industry. There can't be a big impact, because in average terms, the airlines are not operating to their maximum capacity, maximum seating capacity. So in case that this 90% operations during this particular time, if they operate to their full capacity, the same volumes can be handled, and the Sri Lanka will stay connected to.
And also this is only for a very short period, 12 weeks, 3 months. Incidentally, as a matter of interest, who initiated this? I mean, was it, you mentioned about other shareholders also, who initiated this new project?
All credit should go to the Honourable Minister Nima Siripala de Silva, without whom these projects would never have seen the light of day. It was his dynamism that actually saw these projects through. It's not only the runway overlay project, even the Terminal 2 Stage 2 expansion is another project that was somewhat stuck for the longest time, and he has initiated the groundbreaking of that, which will happen first quarter of 2017. We are very pleased to see that, because that is another project that has to see its fruition very soon. So all kudos go to the Honourable Minister on this. We are very thankful to him, and also to the Board of Directors, who have been very supportive of all these activities that we have undertaken.
Yeah, well, it's such a good project, who nobody will object to that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tell me, what are your major plans? Very general question.
If I may start from the airspace itself, we have FIR, which is the Flight Information Region, amounting to almost 520,000 square nautical miles, which is sovereign airspace that belongs to the state, to Sri Lanka. And optimal usage of this airspace is critical. And this is something that we don't particularly address because we don't see and feel it. And we have been looking at modernizing this airspace by way of route structures and procedure development and introducing new technologies and updating current technologies, if you may. And to this end, we have introduced procedures such as performance-based navigation and so on, which is basically constant climb, descent without getting into too much technicality, which affords airlines to save on fuel, reduce carbon emissions, therefore becoming a little bit more environmentally friendly, and so on. We have also introduced RNP procedures and RHS procedures, which basically condenses the amount of airspace, bringing in more aircraft into a given amount of airspace, making it more efficient, safer by way of procedures, increasing efficiency in a nutshell.
Johan, I have to interrupt you for just half a minute for a small message from our sponsor. So please stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back. You're watching Rupees and Cents, brought to you with the compliments of People's Leasing and Finance PLC. And I've been talking to Mr. Johan Jayaratna, Executive Director, Airport and Aviation Services, and Mr. Sanrat Hettiarachchi, the Head of Airport Management, about the Bandaranaike International Airport's future. Johan, you were talking about the airspace, if I remember.
Yes. So to continue on with regard to the airspace enhancements, so we've also introduced some technologies such as ADSB, which is automatic dependence surveillance. Once again, not getting into too much of the technicalities of it. It's basically a situational awareness for aircraft, and the air traffic management systems, which is once again about flight planning and so on, and the aeronautical information management systems, which basically once again just automates the current systems that we have, which makes us more efficient. And that pretty much covers the airspace management and the increase of efficiency that we have from the systems that we have currently. Moving right along to the arrangements that we have made on ground with regard to capacity enhancements. As you know, we have a terminal which is now at an overcapacity situation right now. The terminal that we have has a capacity of 6 million passengers, and we are probably going to be accommodating over 9 million passengers by the end of 2016, so we'll be 50% over capacity. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be breaking ground for the new terminal first quarter of next year, which will add another 9 million throughput passenger capacity by the year 2020. So that will bring us up to 15 million total passenger capacity at BIA by somewhere around 2020. That will see us through until 2020. But then we are going to have a similar problem by that time period, because we will, if you look at our growth trajectory, we will be at 15 million by 2020 again. So now would be a very good time for us to start planning for a Terminal 3 option, which we will probably commence planning beginning next year. And also a second runway, which has been talked about for a while. So we are actually looking very seriously at that planning process as well. Now, with the terminal expansion, we are also looking at apron expansion, which is part of the whole development of the expansion process. The apron expansion will add another 23 parking bays, which will bring another, add another 23. That will bring us up to 48 parking stands for aircraft, and another 16 aero bridges, which will bring it up to 24 parking bridges total. And bus gates, we'll add another 10 bus gates, and that will once again bring the total up to 16 bus gates.
With any other international airport?
Yes, almost. So now we talked about the airspace expansion, and we talked about the apron and the terminal expansions.
And also it will add 96 additional check-in counters and the 56 immigration counters. Yes.
With all these things happening, I'm sure it will affect the tourism industry in a big way.
Absolutely, because it's all about capacity enhancement. So we are going to increase the capacities to accommodate more passengers and more aircraft. Speaking of aircraft, we are going into the runway area now. Now with the overlay project, we are going to also widen the runway, which will then allow us to accommodate the 380. Which is the largest aircraft in operation right now, and also introduce the foundations for rapid exit taxiways, which would allow for an aircraft to exit the active runway much faster to accommodate arrival or a departure in a shorter period of time. That by doing so, we will increase the runway capacity from the current 25 movements an hour to 35 movements an hour, arrivals and departures, thereby increasing the runway capacity. So if you follow my trend here, you are increasing your airspace capacity, you have increased your runway capacity, you've increased your apron capacity, and you increased your terminal capacity. Thereby you have increased your overall capacity at the airport, thereby bringing in more passengers into the country. So this would automatically feed into the tourism industry, if you may, and the general tourism industry at large,
and creating employment.
Right. So this it's a process that we have planned, and it feeds into the Sri Lankan economy.
How long do you think approximately? How long will it take to sort of finalize all these things and come into proper place?
Actually, the Space 2 project, the new terminal will be completed by before 2020.
20?
Yes.
2020?
Yes.
Right.
Otherwise, we cannot cope up with the current volumes. We'll have to, because we had to do it yesterday, but we are still at the time.
Right.
But what is also very positive about this is once we get over this hurdle, we are now at a point where we can be very proactive about the development efforts of aviation at BIA particularly, because now we can start planning for Terminal 3 and the second runway and so on and so forth, which is us being very proactive for the first time, and start planning for the future, 2030 and so on. So these are very good things, and we're very excited about it at Airport Aviation.
Are you going to be closed for 3 months now? Now, I'm assuming that, all the airlines that have been operating, they would have obviously extended their fullest cooperation in this regard.
Absolutely. At this point, I must say, at this juncture, I must also be very appreciative of the airlines who have been very supportive, and also the Civil Aviation Authority, who's held hands with us throughout this whole process and supported us throughout. And we also have worked very closely with immigration and customs and all these other ancillary stakeholders who have worked very closely with us in supporting us, and we expect them to help us throughout this entire process and into the whole development of all these programs that we have in place.
Right.
So a big thank you to all of these agencies.
Yes. Now, finally, I'd like to know, so the arrangements that you have made for smooth operation during the period that you are going to be closing the airport for 3 months from January.
So, actually, now that, as I said, the flight schedule for the particular period has been finalized now.
Okay.
So we know where we have the peaks and where we have the lull times in the terminal. So when we go through the new flight schedule, we see there are 2 areas where we have peaks. So we anticipate fairly traffic congestion probably in the landside areas that we have discussed with police, and they have done special traffic arrangements during these 2 peaks. So we are certain that we can handle the traffic very smoothly during this period. In fact, we urge the public that they should limit their visitors coming into the airport during this particular period.
That is during the period only.
Yes, yes. The rest of the time, of course, we can cater their requirements. We can have the public. But during these peaks, of course, we will be not permitting the public into our public concourses. And also, we have enhanced our facilities wherever we have identified as the bottlenecks, like the security screening facilities and the additional temporary check-in counters and the staff arrangements, and the airlines have agreed to start their check-in 5 hours ahead of the departure time, so that we can ease off the congestions if anything to happen. As well as the other facilities in the terminal, we have looked into the enhancing all these facilities, and we are certain that we can tackle this situation, because there's only 2 peak hours that we observe. Even now we handle those peaks at the terminal. So with these additional facilities coming into the terminal area, so we are certain that we can handle this situation. There's nothing to be panicked about the situation.
Now, finally, when you say 8 hours, is it in a specific period from 8 to 4 or something like that? Or?
Yeah, actually, it is just before the closure. Just before the closure, that is 7 to 8, we have about 14 departures, 14 to 15 departures. And once we resume the runway operations, after 2 hours after the resumption, we have another peak.
Okay.
So those are the 2 areas we need to concentrate more.
Right. Well, sounds great. And I sincerely hope that all your plans will be highly successful, and I thank you very much for telling us about the future of our airport. All the best to both of you and to your organization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we conclude Rupees and Cents tonight, and we'll be back again 2 weeks from today. Do join us then. Good night.